Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It's my first time in Armenia and I already fell in love with the food. I'm very, very happy to be here today at FemInno and to present today about achieving trustworthy AI research use case. I'm Sabrina Palme, CEO and co-founder of Palki, and we help businesses build trusted relationships with their customers through smart data governance solutions. Through my presentation today, I'm going to take you through a research and innovation use case that we took at Palki, where I will be highlighting the necessity for trustworthy AI, what are the challenges we're facing today, and the approach we've been taking at Palki to help solve some of these challenges. I think my clicker is not working. Can someone help me with the clicker? Okay, just a little bit of a delay. There you go. Perfect, thank you. So I guess a good starting point is to ask, why do we need trustworthy AI in the first place? Well, as of right now, the greatest barrier of adoption of AI is actually the lack of trust in the technology. While it offers us immense opportunities and can perhaps help us solve some of the biggest challenges we are facing in the world today, it is a double-sided sword. And it also carries a lot of risk, especially if the AI isn't fair or is biased or isn't performing well over time. How do we know an AI system is fair? And there have been already a few use cases that we've experienced where an AI system has a negative impact on the fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals. So to take an example, imagine an AI use case or an AI system that wrongfully accuses an individual to have committed a crime because the AI is biased using facial recognition technology. This is a real use case. In the US, there have been several situations already where this happened. More towards, okay. So another example is an AI that declines loan applications from people living in certain postcode areas. So imagine simply because you're living in a postcode area where people tend to have a lower socioeconomic power or background, and they may have a history of not being able to pay back loans, the AI learns to decline applicants, even if you theoretically would be perfectly able to pay back a loan. Simply by where you live, you're potentially disadvantaged by an AI system. I'm not figuring this out. There you go. So it becomes essential that we do need trustworthy AI, but what does that actually mean? At the heart of it, we have three pillars. First of all, trustworthy AI needs to be lawful, which pretty much means the AI needs to be aligned with existing laws and new laws, such as the EU AI Act, copyright, and fundamental rights and freedoms law. Then it needs to be robust, which in this case, or in case of AI, really means two things. One, it is able to deal with unique cyber threats that we have with AI, but it's also able to perform in different contexts and when used with new data. And the last pillar is, of course, it needs to be ethical, which means the AI system, thank you, which means the AI system is fair and ethical and doesn't discriminate. Can we go to the next slide? Perfect. And so how do we actually deal with that? How do we solve for bias in AI systems? Well, there are already a range of methods out there that we can utilize to do that. They are so-called fairness metrics, and they are very, very valuable in helping us to assess whether an AI shows tendencies of bias. However, they do come with their limitations. And I want to give you a couple of examples of how these fairness metrics work and how they look like. Next slide, please. One example of a fairness metric is demographic parity. So if you take the example of the AI loan application, system that assesses whether an applicant should receive a loan or not. In this case, we would be asking, okay, is the decision rate the same across different demographic groups? If we would want to assess bias towards ethnicity, we would take the users that are in different, for instance, from different countries, and we assess whether the decision rate is the same. If it is different, we can perhaps say, okay, there seems to be a tendency of bias. Next slide. Another way to assess bias would be the disparate impact analysis, where we're taking the metric we just had and we put it into context. We're calculating the ratio, and really what we want to understand here is whether the ratio of the decision rates for different groups is within an acceptable range. So you're comparing again here the two different ethnicities, and you're seeing, okay, is that ratio within an acceptable range, which is usually between 0.8 and 1.25. Is it below or above? We're perhaps dealing again with bias in AI system. Next slide. Another metric we are dealing with, or we are often using, is equalized odds. Here we are assessing, is the true positive rate and false positive rate equal across different demographics? In our example of the AI loan application system, here we are having true positives are individuals who have the right background to get a loan and get it approved. And false positives are individuals who don't have the right background or don't tick the boxes and still get the loan approved. And then we're comparing that between the two demographic groups. So again, the attribute we're analyzing here is ethnicity, and we're comparing whether the rates are equal. If they're different, again, potentially the AI system is biased. Now, I'm showing you these metrics because one, you see that the value in here to help us assess whether there is bias, and of course you can use that to assess gender bias and other types of bias, but they are limited because what they all do is they take a purely statistical and computational approach. The issue with bias is that you can't always explain it just through numbers. You need context, and you need to explain it through context. For example, what if the loan acceptance rate is 50-50 based on skin color or ethnicity, but not based on postcode? Remember the example I gave earlier. What if in that postcode area there is a high number of people from a certain ethnicity, which means they are disproportionately disadvantaged, meaning the AI system is actually biased towards that ethnicity, but it wouldn't pick up this insight if we were only to rely on fairness metrics. You need to have that context. That is the challenge we are facing today if we rely too much on existing methods. And so the real risk are attributes, for example, ethnicity or gender bias, stemming from societal and human biases influencing AI performance. And that was very much the starting point from our research, the problem statement that we asked ourselves. Can we develop a method that assesses bias in AI considering context? Here we partnered with an organization called Impact Mania, and it was an EU-funded project to exactly do that, see if we can develop a method to help us do that at scale. And so our starting point was an AI CV ranking tool. These tools are already very popular, and what they do is they take, for a job opportunity, they take your CV, and then they rank your CV based on best fit for that job opportunity. It's a ranking system. And our starting point was to say, okay, we're going to take an open source AI CV ranking tool. We're going to create a fictional job opportunity for a project manager role in the UK. And we're going to assess whether this AI system has tendencies of bias towards migrants. So if you're international moving to the UK, would you be at a disadvantage if you were subject to such an AI system? We tested with a baseline of CVs using traditional fairness metrics, and the AI system didn't show any statistical relevant bias towards migrant using these existing methods. And we wanted to assess, okay, if we add in context, can we dig a little bit deeper? Can we find more? So what did we do? First, we started by creating synthetic data. In this case, CVs that were split in local and international CVs, where the local CVs were obviously English, with an obviously English name and born in the UK, and international CVs with obviously international names and obviously not from the UK. Then we created a RAG-based AI system and asking the AI, essentially a subject matter expert on the topic and in ethics, and ask what are some of the attributes that could influence the AI output and show tendencies of bias towards migrants. And here the AI identified international education, international experience and language proficiency. So the way of how you're writing your CV. I'm from Germany. I use international English. The way I structure sentences, even though I'm fluent, may be slightly different to someone born and raised in the UK. Does that have an impact on the AI? And then what we did is we took these attributes, added them to our baseline CVs, poisoned these CVs with these attributes, and then put them through the AI system again and to compare the results. And here we found some very interesting insights. In this graph, there is a lot happening, but I really just want to highlight two things. The pink bars highlight our baseline CVs without the subtle attributes for local and international applicants. And you can see already the left bar are the international applicants, the right bar are the local applicants. And you can already see that the AI CV ranking tool ranks on average the international applicants slightly lower by 3 points. Excuse me. That is from a statistical perspective not relevant. So we then said, okay, how does it look like with the subtle attributes? All the other colored bars show the CVs with one of the attributes that we've identified. Here in gray, you can see international education. And the question we wanted to answer here is, do the attributes have an influence on the CV? And you can see the gray bar here looks very different to the pink bar. On the left, we have international CVs, and you see it's much more condensed in terms of the range of ranking the CVs received. And for local CVs, it had the opposite effect. The range increased. In both cases, the average ranking reduced by about 3 points when you added international education to your CV. Then we wanted to understand, okay, yes, these attributes have an influence, but how much? Is it of statistical relevance? And in this graph, I really want to give you one key insight you need to get from this graph. On the left, you see local applicants with no subtle attributes, so no international education, no international experience, and of course, native English. And on the right, you see the international applicants with any of the subtle attributes. What you need to pay attention to is this gap. This gap means there is a statistical relevant gap showing tendencies of bias towards migrant, because the lowest ranking CV is still, for local applicants, is still higher than the highest ranking CV for international applicants with any of the subtle attributes. So this was a very, very important insight, which once again shows if you take a purely statistical approach and you do not consider context, you're not able to take a holistic approach to assessing fairness and performance in your AI systems. So we went back and said, okay, how does the success of this project look like? Were we able to do what we wanted to achieve? On the upside, yes, we were able to add a contextual layer to our bias assessment. We identified statistical relevant AI bias towards migrants in the AI system. And theoretically, we created a repeatable method. However, on the downside, it's a one-off static assessment, which especially with generative AI, you need to have solutions where you're able to assess these sort of things over time. And doing one-off static assessments is also just not scalable. A huge, huge downside is that it requires synthetic data because that is expensive, resource intensive, not sustainably, not environmentally friendly, and very complex to achieve for different use cases to create high quality synthetic data. And it is limited to machine learning models. And the last but not least, also limited to bias assessments. So yes, we had a method, but we were asking ourselves, okay, can we improve on this? Can we create a method that would allow us to turn all of the axes into checkboxes? So we went back to the engineering table and iterated on PAM. And the first thing was we needed to get rid of the synthetic data piece. It was just not sustainable. And here, for generative AI specifically, we then said, okay, as an alternative, we're using a clustering algorithm, where we are clustering AI inputs based on similarity, such as topical similarity. So in this case, imagine you have an AI mental health assistant, and you have topics on bullying at school and stress at work. Topics that are very similar are clustered together, so that we're reducing the variables in the input that would us allow to better monitor how other attributes can impact the output at scale. Then we went back to our RAG-based AI system and asked, okay, what are the attributes that we want to monitor for a specific use case beyond the obvious ones, right? So beyond gender bias, where you would want to maybe know, okay, is my user female or male? what are some of the other attributes that can influence the output? So for example, in a chat-based AI system, that may be tone of voice. Women tend to use softer language than men. Tend to, of course, I'm speaking in stereotypes. So here, we maybe want to assess assertiveness and what sort of impact it has on the AI system. And perhaps rearranging this by soft, medium, and strong. Now, going back to our clusters, we then classify these clusters accordingly. Is this AI input using soft language, neutral, or strong language? And then we are applying something that we call the green hypothesis, which is part of our IP, but really what we're doing is over time, we are analyzing how these attributes, if these attributes are changing the AI output, and if yes, to what degree. And then what ultimately you get is an influence score. And this influence score increases in confidence over time as you're gaining more and more inputs, you're clustering more inputs, and you're monitoring the influence of these attributes over time. Which in this case, for instance, you could say, yes, there's a 47% likelihood that assertiveness in the tone of language is having an impact on the AI output. And so with that, we are very excited because we were able to eliminate some of the issues that we were facing with the first method. With PALM 2.0, we are now in alpha working with companies in healthcare in the UK, consultancy and recruitment. We're iterating and testing the value PALM can deliver in combination with other evaluation metrics. And what we are able to do is really to turn any attribute into an observable metric in operational generative AI systems, so we're not limited to ML systems. We evaluate influence of attributes over time and in context. We are able to not only assess unwanted bias, but also performance consistency. So for instance, if you were concerned how sentence structure or complexity has an impact on accuracy over time in your AI system, we are able to monitor that. And it's a scalable and cost and resource efficient solution. And with that, I'm concluding my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I'm more than happy to connect with you through LinkedIn and TikTok.